everyone. Welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host, Paula Taylor, and this is episode 178. Today, we're going to talk about spiritual protection and the 5D. And some of the information that I'm going to share today is very fresh. Like it literally came in today, and my guides told me to talk about this today. The first thing I want to say is I want to say thank you to the people who reached out to me about the last episode. The last full episode of the podcast was about discernment and the 5D. And it was a vulnerable thing to share, and it was a little bit difficult to share that story. And I had multiple people reach out and tell me how helpful it was to them, how it sort of helped clarify some things in their mind. And so it really, first of all, it's always nice to get feedback because then I feel like I'm not talking into a void. And the people in the spiritual integration sanctuary are always great about commenting on the video, and I really appreciate that. But I had people from outside of that space reaching out to me about this episode on discernment, and it was a really vulnerable thing to share. And the other thing that's nice is that it's always a confirmation to me when I share something that feels hard to share, that does feel vulnerable, that maybe has a little shame associated around it. I know I'm not the only one, but sometimes it feels that way. And so when somebody comes back to me and they say, hey, that really helped me, or that I really identified with that, it's always a beautiful exchange. So I just wanted to say thank you. And this topic is kind of an extension of that. As always, you don't have to have listened to that episode to get something from this one, but I do suggest going back and listening to it because it was an important topic. And it's very relevant right now. It's kind of relevant all the time. But with this 3D to 5D shift that's been going on since about June of 2024, no matter when you're listening to this, this is something that's going to be going on for a few years at least, if not the rest of our lives. Hopefully not in such a chaotic way as right now in January 2025. But I digress. So today we're going to talk about spiritual protection and the 5D. Spiritual protection is something that I've always had a different view on than some other practitioners. I talk about active versus passive protection. It's something we talk a lot about in dimensional frequency expansion in those classes. But like everything else right now, spiritual protection is evolving as we move from the 3D to the 5D. So if you're not familiar with those terms, essentially we have been in a denser vibration, a fear-based vibration for a long time as humans. And there's this humanity-wide call to expand into a more loving, expanded vibration, a less dense vibration, the 5D. And along with this, there's a lot of things coming up to be seen, to be talked about, to be released, things that are shifting as we move, as we're like in this weird in-between. And I'm going to talk a lot about that and how that relates to protection, because it's very important right now. So I know multiple people, myself included, who have had experiences in the last few months of what some people might call astral or psychic assault or attack. Essentially, I've had a couple dreams, one of them pretty recently, where I was in a full-on, essentially like psychic warfare in my dream, where someone was attacking me and I was having to use energy and intention to send them out of my field. And I have a couple of other people who have come to me recently about really intense experiences of astral assault. That's the only way I can put it. And sometimes this feels like it's a dream, but it's not. In my experience, like it was a lucid dream. Like I knew it wasn't really a dream, that it was something that was important, that was really happening, that I was being asked to stand up and hold my space and protect myself in this non-physical realm. So why is this coming up so much right now? That's where we're going to start. And how do we protect ourselves? So I was thinking about this. I was thinking about how to explain this in a way that made sense. And it's always interesting when I see some other people saying things and then it kind of clicks in my brain. So I'll see if I can do justice to this sort of explanation. So right now, the veil between the physical and the non-physical, the physical and the spiritual, is thinner than it's ever been as part of this transition from 3D to 5D. in a 5D reality, we're not moving out of the 3D because we have 3D bodies. 3D bodies means density enough to exist in the physical. 5D is a spiritual space. So there are beings who only exist in the spiritual. Beings, sometimes people who have passed on, that would be an example. But there's all sorts of beings that are around us all the time who do not exist in the physical. They exist in the spiritual or the quantum realm. That's another way to put that. And psychics, intuitives, people who communicate with this realm have been doing this for many, many, many years and oftentimes being dismissed or not believed. And now we have much more mounting scientific evidence to support this. And more than ever before, most people, I think, have some belief or understanding that there's something beyond this physical realm, whether it's just electromagnetic fields that we have documented scientifically that exists. You know, there's all these ghost hunting shows and things where people are trying to scientifically study this phenomenon that many of us have known about, have experienced for years. There are a lot of people right now having more experiences of those things, seeing things out of your periphery, like out of the corner of your eye, and being like, oh, what's in there? Feeling presences, feeling like there's something else in a space with you that is really can be very triggering and very scary. So there's a lot more experience. People's awareness is opening. That's part of this 3D to 5D transition. Again, we're not leaving the body. We're not leaving the 3D. It's like a widening. It's an expansion. So yes, I'm in my physical body, in physical reality, but my senses are opening and I'm receiving more information than I've ever received before that is not in the physical. Again, some of us have been doing this for a long time, but even those of us who've been doing this for a long time, like me, are noticing a shift. There is a lot more noise around us in this quantum realm, in this non-physical or spiritual realm. And so the other part of this is that not all of the things that come through in this spiritual or quantum realm are for your highest good. We talked about discernment last time. And I definitely, again, suggest you go back and listen to that because this is kind of building on that idea. What do I allow into my space? What do I believe? Because that's the other thing. Sometimes we have a tendency, those of us who work with things like spirit guides, we have a tendency to naively assume that any energy that's coming in, as long as it feels okay, is okay, you know, that this is for our highest good. And the way I was thinking about sort of explaining this is this idea of what I call source, which you might call God or spirit or the oneness, whatever you want to think about as the original energy that is unconditional love, that we are all made of. Anything that is differentiated from source has an aspect of not being source. So true source energy is pure unconditional love. And we occasionally, or sometimes through a lot of practice, more than occasionally get to experience that here in this physical realm. And anything that is not source energy has an aspect of density to it. Density in itself is not bad. However, being in a duality, the only way we know what something is to know what it's not. So as soon as something differentiates from source and comes into a light body, a non-physical 5D body, or 9D or 12D, there's all these Ds. I don't need to get into that idea of like which is in what dimension. To me, that's not usually helpful. Non-physical things that are not source have some physical aspect to them. They have some density to them. And as soon as you introduce density, as soon as you introduce something that is not unconditional love, because that's the definition of this is unconditional love, this has an aspect that is not an aspect of density, you can open the door for an experience of fear, essentially. All that exists is love and fear. And there's a lot of complexity around that. It's a very basic, like boiled down statement that you could like argue about for years probably and get into much more nuance. But essentially, as soon as something differentiates out of source energy, there's an aspect of it that is not source energy. That is how source energy experiences itself. So the denser we get, the more non-source energy in the physical exists. That is why we have light and dark. Like, I don't know what light is if we don't have dark, because if everything's light, what is light? What does that mean? That's how we have love and fear. That's how we have the opposites, the duality that we have in this reality. And so anything that is not pure source energy is subject to corruption, for lack of a better word. That's an interesting word to use right now. That's what came through. And so, as the veil is thin and thinning and continues to thin, and even people who did not ever have experiences of working with this quantum energy, with this spiritual realm before, begin to experience that, there is a lot of opportunity there for energies that are not benevolent, that are not working for the highest good, to kind of weasel their way in to people's energetic fields. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of that, because at the end of the day, I'm an energy worker. I'm an energy anatomy nerd, and I like to get into the specifics of energetic anatomy, keeping it not so nerdy that hopefully you can't understand or relate, because that's not helpful either. But there's this idea in the spiritual community, in the New Age community, of like, everything is love and light. We did an episode a while back where I talked about spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity. This is this idea that like everything serves my highest good. Everything is love and light. Everything is wonderful all the time. That's not truth. That's not how a physical reality of duality works. If everything was wonderful all the time, how would we know that it was wonderful? Sometimes it has to be not wonderful for us to recognize what is wonderful. So, as much as I would like to say, as we expand into the 5D, everything is love and light and wonderful and it's amazing, there is an aspect of it that is, but we are also moving, our energetic bodies are physically changing. I have been working with energy for over 20 years. I am very familiar with the energy, the energetic anatomy of the physical body. It is changing. Our chakras are elongating. Now we are having access to a much larger auric or quantum field, the field around our body, the electromagnetic field, than we ever have before. There are structures coming in. There is information coming in that we did not have access to. And that's amazing as we make this shift. But because we are still in a physical reality, we are not the source of all that is, because some of this is not. That is how we experience 3D. That is how duality exists. Not all of this new energy is what people, I almost said high vibrational, which is not my favorite term, and we don't want to go down that road. I did a whole show on that. Not all of it is benevolent. Not all of it is expansive. Not all of it is clear. Not all of it is harmonious. Not all of it is serving the highest good. And so as we negotiate, as we navigate through this expansion, it actually makes complete sense to me that we have to start talking about protection, because as our field gets larger, more energy exists within it. What is that energy? Where did that energy come from? Is that my energy? Is that someone else's energy? Am I tapping into the energy of a non-physical space? Is there, an entity, a being, a glob? You could use any word. I'm not a fan of entity, but there are energies that are not our energies. That is the nature of being in a 3D reality, in a duality. It's not just 3D. Anything that's not source means that something is not source. So you may be tapping into someone who feels like a spirit guide to you, and you can get tricked. That is what my whole last show was about. That these ancestors came forward from my ancestral line, and they offered me this connection, and they offered me this link to this energy that I felt like I was missing. And so I said yes, because at the time I felt like it was for my highest good. My guides were trying to warn me that it wasn't. My dad, who's not in the physical, was trying to warn me that it wasn't. But I'm human. I'm not perfect. And so I sort of ignored those little warnings. It's like when you have that little voice at the back of your mind and you're like, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's okay. And I invited that energy in, and then it was not serving my highest good. It was not benevolent. It was not expansive, and I had to disinvite it from my field. I had to use discernment. That's how discernment leads directly into protection. I had to recognize that this was not serving me, and then I had to disinvite it, and that's where the protection comes in. And in that case, and in many cases, once something gets into your field, you can't do it alone. The discernment, you may need help with the discernment. You may need help with the energetic shift. And we're going to talk about that when we talk a little bit more about this energetic anatomy. So let's talk about practical tips for working with this energy. So we have energy within the body. We have energy around the body. And this is all part of our energetic field. On a quantum level, everything is one, and we're all connected, and we're all made of the same stuff. In this physical reality, we have discrete bodies. I have a physical body that I can touch that is separate from my husband's body. We're two separate beings. I have an energetic field that exists within and around my body that is separate from the energetic bodies of other people I meet. And that's where this starts to get interesting and a little bit nuanced and a little bit difficult, is that we're constantly overlapping energies, and most of us have a tendency to allow the energy to mix, to kind of mesh together. In a healing session, I do that with people on purpose in a contracted way with a very clear beginning and end point, and I am careful to separate us at the end. Having space held for you, essentially what that means is that somebody is energetically in your space, holding space. Your energies are kind of mingled somewhat. You might set the intention to not mingle them, but on a subatomic level, there is some mingling. There is some enmeshment. That sounds like a negative word, and it can be. So most people are walking around without any intention, without any awareness of what their energy is doing, how they're using their energy, who's in their energy, where is my energy? Is my energy in your field? Is your energy in my field? All of this, as we go through this shift, is getting more intense. People are starting to become aware of energy, and they don't know what to do about it. They don't know how to work with it because no one's ever taught energetic literacy. You can go back. I did a whole show about energetic literacy, maybe like a year ago or so, and why I think it's so important that everyone has some basic knowledge of energetic literacy. It's why I wrote my book, Spiritual Integration. It's like a beginner's guide to working with your own energy and figuring out how to feel energy and how to move energy within your system. And then there's a chapter on energetic cords, working with your energy and other people's energy. So let's talk about some practical tips on how to deal with energy in your field. So when you start to get an awareness that something's off, whether you notice that something doesn't feel right, maybe somebody points it out to you, like in my case, hey, this energy you're working with, to me, doesn't feel like it's for your highest good. You should check in with that. That's how my session kind of went when I recognized that ancestral energy. There are some questions to ask. There is a process you can go through that will help you with the discernment and then with figuring out, is this my energy or not? So this is a process of questioning or interrogation. So the first thing is that you have to have some awareness. Something feels off. And sometimes it's a very little awareness. Or like in my case, my guide sent me an image of the evil queen in Snow White disguised as a sweet old woman giving Snow White an apple. Like that was my first indication. Hey, you should look closer into this energy before you invite it into your system. And I ignored it. Oops, it happens. We're human. Once something is in your field, it has to tell you what it is. So if you can recognize that something is in your energy that doesn't feel good, that feels uncomfortable, that feels like it's draining, that feels like it's making you tired, that feels like it's making you angry, that feels like it's producing a lot of fear. Once you find the energy, it has to identify itself because it is in your field. It is part of you. It's like, if I tell my arm to move, it has to move. It's my arm. I mean, if everything's functioning properly, if I have awareness and I have the proprioceptive and the nervous system impulses that will move my arm. So when you recognize something in your field that feels off, the first thing to ask is, first of all, what are you? That's the first question. What is this? And you'll get lots of different answers. There's no right or wrong to this. This is, and like one of the things I ask clients first is like, what's an identifying feature of this energy? What does it feel like? Does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? Does it have an emotion? What does this energy feel like? Because you've identified that something feels off. What is it that feels off? Is it producing a fearful emotion? Is it kind of actually like pressing on you physically? Are you having a physical reaction? Oh, my heart is beating when I think about this energy. So what is the energy? What is associated with it is the first question. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Can I get a visual if you're a visual person? As it looks like a big red brick. Oh, it feels like a heavy rock. It feels like there's a weight on my chest. It feels like I'm scared. However you can identify something with it. Then the second question is this my energy? Is this mine? That is the most important question, but you can't ask that question until you identify the energy, because everything in your field feels like yours. It's in your field. Once you can pick out the little nuanced area that's like, ooh, I don't like this. What is this? Is this mine? A lot of times it is. And it has to answer you, and it has to answer you honestly once it's in your field. Is this my energy? What happens a lot of times is we have, ironically, something that acted as a protective mechanism at a certain point in our lives, like in childhood, for example, that later on is not serving us. So sometimes you identify this energy. Oh, this feels like a weight on my chest. Ooh, I don't like it. Is this mine? Yes. Oh, wait, what? This is my energy? And once you get an answer that it's yours, then that is a line of interrogation about where did this come from? What purpose is it serving? Because when you have energy that's in your own system, it's serving a purpose. Oh, well, when I was being bullied as a child, I developed this armor around my chest so it wouldn't hurt as much when people said mean things to me. It served me at a certain point. Now it is not. And a lot of times when you work with energy that is yours in this way, and you talk to the energy like it has its own personality, like it has a consciousness, because it does. And it's funny, I'm using this example that is like a real example, I realize, as I'm talking about this, but this is helpful. Okay, I feel this like weight on my chest. Is this energy mine? Yes. What is this energy? Well, this is this protective energy that I started building around my heart space as a child because I was being bullied and it hurt. I was very sensitive. So when people said mean things, it felt like it went right into my heart space and it caused me pain. So basically I started layering out protection. Okay. And that makes total sense. And this energy has been serving me. This energy was here to help me. It was here to protect me. When I get to a point where I'm like, I don't think this is protecting me anymore. I think this energy is actually stifling me. It's stifling my expression. It's stifling whatever it is. Usually this energy wants to serve you. So when I say to this energy, hey, I am so appreciative of what you did for me all of these years protecting me. It's actually making me emotional, my example. But now I think it's actually, you're no longer fulfilling that. You're no longer protecting me. In fact, I think this is actually hurting me. And most of the time when you engage with an energy this way, sometimes even when it's not your energy, the energy is like, oh, I didn't realize that. I've just been trying to do my job. I'm going to use a Rick and Morty reference. I don't think I've ever done this on the show. So there's an episode of Rick and Morty where they introduce this character called Mr. Meeseeks. And Mr. Meeseeks' whole purpose is to do whatever you've asked him for. You say, you call Mr. Meeseeks and he says, I'm Mr. Meeseeks, look at me. And then you say, I need you to type my term paper. And Mr. Meeseeks types your term paper and then he disappears out of existence. That's his whole purpose. So if you don't give Mr. Meeseeks a purpose, there's a whole storyline there where like he starts having an existential crisis. So when we develop these patterns of energy, that's really all this is a pattern of energy. In my case, let's say this pattern of protection that developed in childhood, when we engage with the energy and the energy recognizes like, oh, I was here to serve you. I was here to write your term paper. I wrote my term paper a long time ago and you're still hanging out. The energy will a lot of times go, oh, all I ever wanted to do was help. I'm happy to release. I'm happy to move on and be recycled into something that will serve the highest good elsewhere, outside of your field usually. So that's why we ask, is this mine? You may need help with all of this. This may sound like a lot. It may sound overwhelming. That is why people like me exist. I am a professional energy worker. I do this for a living. It's really helpful to have someone holding space around this stuff, whether it's your energy or not, because it's been in your field for so long. A lot of times it's like, oh, I just thought my chest was always going to feel tight and heavy. That was just how I was made, because this protection has existed for so long. It really feels like part of yourself. If you ask that question, is this energy mine? And it says no, remember, recognize that you are fully empowered within your own field. And you may need help to disinvite this energy. So if you ask the question, is this energy mine? And it says no, who are you and why are you here? And they cannot lie to you once you directly confront them. They can trick you and do all sorts of things. Once I confronted that ancestral energy with the help of my friend who's a body worker who was supporting me, it was like, oh, well, actually, we're kind of into this like dark art stuff. And we were hoping that if we like weaseled our way far enough into your energy, you have all this beautiful like angelic energy and all this power. And we were hoping to basically like harness that for evil. Essentially. And once they tell you the truth, then you have the right to say, get out. You are not welcome in this space. This is my space. I disinvite you from this space. Depending on how insidious this energy is, like how far it's made its way into your system, how strong it is, how intense it is, at this point, you absolutely may need help. There is no shame in that. But know that on a fundamental level, you are empowered to move energy in your own system. And even reaching out for help is just having someone else hold the space and the intention with you. It's this idea of amplifying what you already want. I don't like this energy. I want it gone. I can't seem to do it myself, or I couldn't even find it myself. Then you have someone else who's like, all right, let's work together. And, you know, if it's a professional, they can hold kind of an objective space to help you do that. But asking those questions is really important so that you know what's really going on. Now, here's where the channeling information comes through. And if you're in the Spiritual Integration Sanctuary, we're going to work with this directly today in a really powerful exercise that I had archangels doing this on me earlier, and now I'm going to share it with you. So get ready. We're going to do it. But first, I'm going to talk about it and kind of explain it. And so if you're not in the Spiritual Integration Sanctuary, you can work with this idea. You can work with this on your own. You can reach out for help if you want a guided kind of meditation activation to work with this. Join us. We'd love to have you. So I had a really interesting experience. I had some body work this morning, and I was telling, this was a person who does massage and energy work, and which is great to have a mix. And I was like, oh, my physical body, this and this and this, but like energetically, things have been feeling kind of weird, and I'm not sure what's going on in my, like from my heart up, and there, you know, there's all this shifting, and I feel like I just need some space held. And he did do some direct work with that, which is really interesting. But what happened very early on in the session, when he was still kind of focused on physical stuff, was that two archangels came up. It was Raphael and Gabriel, and they said, hey, we want to help you like move this energy out of your system. And I was like, okay, what is it? And it was like, oh, this is all your energy of kind of shame and lack and feeling unworthy, which ironically are the three things that I set intention to release this year in our rebirthing ceremony. And they're all related, right? Shame comes out of this feeling of being unworthy, or this experience of like internalizing things that make you feel unworthy. Lack, same thing, or scarcity would be another word for that. And it was very interesting because they were pulling all this energy out of my system, and it was kind of focused in my heart and throat. But at one point I could feel it like pulling up out of my fascia and like out of my cells and my mitochondria, which we now know actually carries trauma through the generational lines. And it was like they were kind of scooping out this energy and sort of pulling it out. But the most interesting thing, and this is where this idea of protection came from, is that a lot of people think about protection, first of all, as an active process. There are times when active protection is necessary. In that dream I had my hands out and I was like, no, you do not get to be in this space. Like, that would be an example of active protection. Or people who will tell you, surround your body with light. That's great. However, it takes a bit of energetic bandwidth to maintain that. And that is why unconditional love is the most protective energy that exists, because unconditional love transmutes all else to unconditional love. So that is why I work with source energy, with angelic energy, which is as close to source energy without being source as you can get. You can channel source energy directly. I like to have the archangels help with that because they're pretty close to source energy. Reiki is source energy, universal life force energy. Ki, chi, prana, it's just life force energy. It's all unconditional love. But realistically, again, we're in a duality. We're in a 3D existence. We are not existing in a state of pure unconditional love all the time. So there are times when active protection is necessary, when it can be helpful. There's also times when your protective mechanism is actually hurting you and not helping you. And this is the realization that I had today. Because what we tend to do for protection is sort of armor up, right? We put up a barrier. If you think about protecting your home, you might put up a wall, you might put up a fence, you might, have an alarm or a sign warning people away. You might have a guy with a shotgun at the front of the property or whatever. There's different ways to protect, but it's usually like keeping things out, right? Protection is keeping things out. And there's an aspect of protection that is important for that. Where it gets to be a problem is when your protection, when your barrier is not permeable. So if you think about it, I was working with someone the other day with a fence. And this was like a horse fence. So this is something that someone could fairly easily move in and out of. It's more of like a notice. Hey, look, there's a barrier here. If you have a solid wall, like we do here in Arizona, you have a big brick wall or a concrete wall around your property, things can't get in and they can't get out. So this is what was coming up and what I was channeling today as these archangels, they were pulling all this energy out of me. And they were basically telling me, like, you've armored up this space in order to keep things from getting in and hurting you. Makes sense, right? However, at a certain point, the armoring gets so thick or so impenetrable that nothing can get out, and it is blocking the release from happening. And so it's one of those things where something that started out being protective actually turns out to be something that's harmful, because we do want to be aware. That's where the discernment comes in. We want to be aware of our space and what's coming into our space. We don't want to just be completely open to anything that's coming in this physical realm. But they gave me a different way to think about it, or a different way to open. So they were opening me from the inside out. And at first I was like, well, if I'm totally open, then anything can get in, right? And the way that it came through, sometimes it's hard to put this in words because it's more like feelings. But it's sort of like, as you open out, first of all, you release all the energy that you didn't want to have in your field in the first place. All this energy that's not serving the highest good anymore, energy that's not yours. You're opening it up. You're like pushing it out. You're expanding your field. It's one of the best ways to protect is to actually expand, because if you think about it, as you open out, energy is moving out. It's kind of like moving from a smaller property to a larger property, right? So if I'm in an apartment, there's other people's energy all around me. If I'm out on a farm, there's all this space around me that's still mine before anybody gets to my space. So it's that idea of, it's kind of a passive protection of being open. The act of opening is not passive, as I just experienced. It was very intentional, very loving and intentional, but also very intense. So they gave me 2 steps. This opening, especially from the front of the body, where we tend to be closed, where we tend to be cautious and guarded. And as you open, you fill that space with love. And again, unconditional love turns everything else into unconditional love. So if you are filling your field with unconditional love by opening your heart space, there's another step here that I'll get to in a second, then what comes in, it can't hurt you, because if it's not love, it's going to either turn around and leave, or it's going to get transmuted into love. I've been thinking about protection in these terms for a long time, but I never thought about this idea. It was like shining a light out of a window is kind of how it's coming in. If there's a bunch of shadow around and I don't like that, if I shine a light out of my window, the shadow goes away, because the light and the shadow can't be in the same place at the same time. So the next step to this, or these are kind of simultaneous, is like, we do want to receive, right? We want to be able to receive. As we open our crown, very specifically, very intentionally, we receive energy from source, from that is unconditional love. And it's so funny. That is how Reiki works. It comes in through the top of your head and out and down through your heart and out through your hands. Unconditional love, source energy, is channeled in this way. So they were, in a way, I guess, reaffirming this idea to me that if I want to be truly protected, I have to open my heart. And I fill my heart through my crown with this unconditional loving energy. But we open the crown in a very specific way. Because of everything else I said about all the stuff that's around right now, if we just open I'm open. I've worked with and seen a lot of people go down paths that end up leading them to the opposite of what they're looking for, because they're too open. They're open without discernment. Here's the discernment. I don't want to be open to any old thing that comes in. I want to be open to source energy, to the most benevolent, to the highest good. That is why you hear me. I will never stop, like, broken recordly repeating those types of phrases. So, because you can open your crown to all sorts of other things. Because again, anything that's not source has an aspect of not source to it, of darkness, if you want to use that term, of density. And density can be helpful. We're in a body. We need some density. We need low vibrations. Those are denser, but they also can still be clear and expanded. So that's another way, if you want to kind of move out of the judgmental language that I'm trying so hard to move out of, and it's so pervasive, like high vibe, judgmental, even like expansive, or, you know, there's going to be a this or that, because we are working with this aspect of 3D. But that is why I always come back to clear, harmonious, and expanded. I don't care if my energy is dense or less dense, as long as it's clear. If you when I sat next to those trees in Cambodia, they have a denser energy. It's earth energy. Earth energy, it can be dense and it can be heavy, but it was ultra clear. It was ultra expanded. It was so harmonious and loving. So that is why we qualify the kind of energy we're asking for with that type of languaging, because it is important. Language has vibration, and vibration is everything. Everything is made of vibration. So if I just say, like, bring me all the vibes, like, I'm going to get all the vibes, and some of the vibes are going to be muddy and distorted and not harmonious and dense and contracted and fearful. If I say, bring me the clear, expanded, harmonious vibes, bring me the loving vibes, bring me unconditional love, bring me light. Again, there's maybe some judgment in that, but like, we need that discernment. There's a path, there's a spectrum from like undiscerning all the way down to judgment, and we want to be somewhere in the middle there. Again, we don't want to just allow everything into our field, because it's not all serving our highest good. And people are really seeing that right now, including me. And I've been doing this for a long time. So if you are enjoying the show, we would love to have you join us in the Spiritual Integration Sanctuary. It is $11 a month, and you receive all of the meditations and activations that accompany the full episodes. You receive mini episodes of the podcast, special discounts. Right now, I am running a 10% discount on individual 90-minute healing sessions for people in that group. You get 50% off my activations. So there's a lot of value to be had, not to mention that it's a community of like-hearted individuals on this spiritual awakening path. You are a being of unconditional love on a quantum level. And the more often that we reconnect to that source of what we are, the more of that energy we can allow to fill us, and that energy is protective. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a beautiful rest of your day or evening, and I will see you on the next episode of Wind Down Wednesdays. No.